I am a poor man of little work, laboring in the art God has given me in order to extend my life as long as possible. These are the wise words of Michelangelo, who painted the beautiful Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo's life lives on through the art that he created over 500 years ago, and his frescoes come alive in beautiful biblical scenes that depict emotion and feeling. These scenes still amaze and wonder tourists today, even 500 years after it was created. One of the most beautiful and renowned pieces of Renaissance art in the world, the Sistine Chapel created by Michelangelo, is truly a masterpiece of frescoes that depict and display stunning biblical scriptures. The story of the Sistine Chapel begins in 1477 when Pope Sixtus IV commissioned a rebuild and remodel of the chapel. He first commissioned famous artists of the time, Botticelli and Rosselli, to paint the chapel, and they decided to go with a simple blue sky and gold star ceiling. And according to Jansen and Jansen from History of Art from 1991, they also painted some frescoes on the sides of the chapel, such as the life of Moses. 20 years later, the new pope, Julius II, asked Michelangelo to repaint and redecorate the chapel. Michelangelo was an ornery artist with a short temper and his own ideas, who thought of himself as solely a sculptor, so he was certainly surprised to be commissioned for this task. And after months of persuading, he finally agreed to paint the chapel. He started his work in 1508, and it only took him 4 years to paint the entire chapel. 20 years later, he was commissioned again to paint a larger fresco at the far end of the chapel called the Last Judgment, which again took him 4 years to complete. The Sistine Chapel is one of the most famous works of art in the world, and this whole process took place of only about 100 years, and it still amazes tourists today. The chapel was painted with the art of fresco making, which is a lost art today, but was extremely popular in Michelangelo's time and in the era of Renaissance art. According to Jansen and Jansen from The Story of Painting from 1959, the process to make a fresco is very complicated, but is preferred for murals such as the ones in the Sistine Chapel due to its durability and matte-like finish, which really helps the frescoes to be preserved. The process of making a fresco is as follows. It starts with applying 2 coats of plaster to your surface and allowing them to harden. A third coat of plaster is then added a little at a time to ensure that the pigment and color can be added to the fresco. According to fresco painting from Encyclopedia Britannica Online, pigments are powdery ground colors that are combined with water and are painted onto the plaster little by little at a time. This process is very, very slow going, but it only took Michelangelo a record 4 years to paint the entire chapel and the ceiling. Michelangelo painted the 65-foot-high ceiling while laying on his back on scaffolding, painting above him on the chapel walls. This was hard on not only his back, but the whole process was also hard on his mental health, as he was very short-tempered and didn't want any advice or help from outsiders. He kept this whole masterpiece a secret from the public eye until 1512, when it was finally revealed, and the Pope and the public were absolutely awestruck. According to Zappella from Khan Academy, Michelangelo was originally commissioned to just paint 12 men and scenes on the chapel walls. But Michelangelo, being a man of his own ideas, decided to paint 300 scenes and men instead, which the Pope loved this idea. He decided to paint Old Testament scenes, which start on the ceiling of the chapel, above the altar. The first 3 panels, located above the altar, depict the scene of the creation of the heavens and the earth. The 4th panel, which is the most famous panel in the Sistine Chapel, depicts the story of God creating Adam. It shows Adam's pointer finger reaching down to meet Adam's as it shows his creation. According to Lev from the Untold Story of the Sistine Chapel from December of 2015, one of the angels wrapped in God's arms appears to be a woman, which is Eve. This foreshadows not only the next event that Michelangelo will paint, but also the next event which happens in the Bible, which is the creation of Eve, which Michelangelo depicts in the 5th ceiling panel. The 6th ceiling panel depicts the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve are tempted, and the next 3 panels and the final ones on the ceiling depict Noah and him building the ark, and the people being terrified as the earth is flooded. The Last Judgment is a huge fresco, actually the largest fresco in the world, which is at the far end of the chapel, and was done when Michelangelo was in his 60s. This took him 4 years to complete, and is a representation of the second coming of Christ and Michelangelo's own thoughts and twists on the matter. The people were awestruck and amazed by Michelangelo's work, and even rival artist Raphael was absolutely amazed and included him in his School of Athens painting with the great artists and thinkers of the time after seeing the chapel. 504 years after Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, it is still drawing in record numbers of visitors every day and attracts 5 million people every year. Located in the Vatican City in Rome, Italy, the Sistine Chapel is in a museum which starts as a tour with mazes through the museum so you are able to see other famous pieces of Renaissance art of the time, and it ends at the Sistine Chapel. Visitors amazed as they tilt their heads up and try to take in every single inch of the chapel at one time, which of course is impossible. The Sistine Chapel is truly one of the most beautiful artistic masterpieces in the world. It was created by Michelangelo by using fresco painting to depict the biblical scenes, and 500 years later, it still draws visitors and depicts their amazement every single day. As Michelangelo said it best, "A beautiful thing never gives so much pain as this failing to see it," and that is exactly what he wants us to do, to go and admire his work, not for his credit, but for our own, so we are able to learn and experience this beautiful artistic wonder.